The October light in 1926 had a particular quality in Vermont, filtering through sugar maples that burned like paper money no one could spend anymore. Our man sat hunched over a Royal number 10, its type bars splayed open like the ribs of some mechanical fish, while outside his workshop window the town of Brattleboro went about its Tuesday morning business with the determined cheerfulness of people pretending prohibition wasn't driving them all slowly mad. He was 42 that autumn, though the war had added a decade to his hands, the left one missing its ring and little fingers, courtesy of a German shell at Belleau Wood. Curious thing about losing fingers, the three that remained had developed an almost supernatural sensitivity to vibration, to the slightest misalignment in a typewriter's escapement mechanism. God's compensation, Dr. Whitmore called it, though our man suspected God had nothing to do with it. The workshop occupied the ground floor of a narrow brick building on Elm Street, squeezed between Harriman's Hardware and the offices of the Brattleboro Reformer. The newspaper's constant typing provided a metallic rainfall that had become as essential to his concentration as breathing. 23 typewriters currently awaited his attention, lined up on shelves like patient soldiers. Underwoods and Remingtons mostly, a few Coronas, one ancient Hammond that nobody could fix properly except him. He'd been at the Royal for 2 hours when the bell above his door chimed. Ruth Carlyle entered, carrying the library's Underwood Standard in both arms, her cheeks flushed from either the October cold or something else entirely. She was 38, wore her brown hair in a style 5 years out of fashion, and had been bringing him the library's typewriters for 3 years now, always with the same apologetic smile. "The space bar again," she said, setting the machine on his counter with obvious relief. "Sticks every third word." He ran his remaining fingers along the space bar's mechanism without looking up. "Children been at it?" "The Hemlock boy thinks if he hits it hard enough his poetry will improve." Our man almost smiled, a rare occurrence that would have surprised anyone who knew him. Ruth noticed, as she noticed everything about him, filing it away with all the other small observations she'd collected like pressed flowers. While he examined the Underwood, she browsed his workshop with the false casualness of someone who'd memorized every detail long ago. The framed discharge papers on the wall, the photograph of his unit in France, faces young and ignorant of what was coming. The coffee pot on the potbelly stove that hadn't been cleaned since Coolidge took office. "Dr. Whitmore was in the library yesterday," she ventured. "Mentioned you two have been playing chess on Thursdays. He lets me win every third game, thinks I don't notice. He also mentioned..." She hesitated, then pushed forward. "Strange things happening up at the Blackwood place." Now this was interesting. Cornelius Blackwood, the horror writer who'd inherited that Gothic monstrosity perched above the railroad gorge. Our man had repaired his typewriters before. The writer owned 7 of them, each for a different novel, though word was he hadn't written a page in 3 years. Strange how. He kept his attention on the Underwood's space bar, though his mind had shifted. "His butler's been in town more often, buying supplies, looking worn down," Samuel said. "And there's talk that Mr. Blackwood hasn't left the mansion in 2 months." The space bar's problem was obvious, a bent linkage that would take 5 minutes to fix. But Ruth wasn't here about the typewriter. Not really. She came every week with some minor repair, always on Tuesday mornings when the shop was quiet, always staying exactly 20 minutes. Our man had noticed the pattern without understanding its significance, the way he noticed that she ordered romance novels under false names, having seen the library's acquisition lists when repairing their ordering typewriter. "Writers are strange," he said finally. "Part of the job description." She laughed, a sound like silver spoons against good china. I suppose you'd know, fixin' their machines. He did know. Each typewriter told him about its owner. The violent typists who punched rather than pressed. The nervous ones who wore down the period key from constant stopping. The liars whose semicolons were pristine from never being used. Blackwood typed with mechanical precision, every key worn exactly equally except for the letter X, which remained factory new. When do you need this back? Friday would be perfect. The Women's Literary Society meets Saturday. After she left, trailing lavender water and unspoken intentions, our man returned to the Royal. The workshop settled back into its familiar rhythm. The newspapers typing next door, the radiator's tubercular wheeze, the distant whistle of the 11:15 freight train heading north. He thought about Blackwood's mansion up on Crow's Ridge, that architectural fever dream built by the writer's father during the last gasp of the Gilded Age. 23 rooms for a man who lived alone except for servants. The war had taught him that isolation could drive men to peculiar extremes. He'd seen it in the trenches, where prolonged solitude could make a soldier start conversations with rats. But Vermont isolation was different. Chosen rather than imposed, maintained by money and pride rather than mud and wire. The telegram arrived 3 days later, delivered by the Henshaw boy who always ran like the devil was teaching him arithmetic. Our man was elbow deep in a Remington portable when the kid burst through the door, letting in a gust of October wind that scattered his invoices like frightened birds. From Western Union, sir. Prepaid reply. The yellow paper felt heavier than it should. Require immediate assistance. Stop. Remington Model 12, displaying unusual behavior. Stop. Generous compensation. Stop. Cornelius Blackwood. Stop. Unusual behavior. In 20 years of fixing typewriters, our man had encountered every mechanical failure imaginable, but never had anyone described it quite like that. He gave the Henshaw boy his reply, would arrive tomorrow afternoon, and returned to his work, though his mind kept circling back to those 2 words. The next morning, he borrowed Dr. Whitmore's Ford Model T, the doctor being laid up with gout and generous with his possessions when incapacitated. The drive to Crow's Ridge took 40 minutes along roads that switched from macadam to dirt to something that barely qualified as either. Vermont October showed off shamelessly, hills dressed in copper and scarlet, air sharp enough to cut glass, clouds moving across the sky like ships fleeing winter. Blackwood Manor squatted on its ridge like a Gothic toad, all turrets and gables and windows that reflected nothing. The writer's father, Augustus Blackwood, had built it in 1893 after making his fortune in textiles and misery. The mills were gone now, burned or bankrupt, but the house remained, a monument to money extracted from bent backs and bleeding fingers. The driveway curved through a tunnel of dying elms, emerging at a porte-cochere that could have sheltered a circus. Our man parked the Ford, feeling distinctly working class, and climbed the steps to doors that belonged on a cathedral. Edmund Harwick answered before the echo of the knocker died. 61 years old, British as tea at 4, with the kind of dignity that made you want to check your fingernails. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you, sir. The entrance hall rose 3 stories, lit by stained glass windows that turned the afternoon sun into jewelry. Our man followed Edmund through rooms that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. Vaulted ceilings, Persian carpets that cost more than he made in 5 years, paintings of dead Blackwoods who all seemed constipated with importance. They found Cornelius Blackwood in what he called his writing room, though room was like calling Lake Champlain a pond. Books covered every wall from floor to ceiling, leather spines like scales on some sleeping dragon. The writer stood beside a desk the size of a boarding house bed, and on it sat the Remington Model 12. "Thank you for coming." Blackwood was 58 but looked older, gray-faced and hollow around the eyes, wearing a smoking jacket that had seen better decades. "I apologize for the dramatic summons, but I'm at my wit's end." Our man approached the typewriter with professional calm, though something about the scene felt theatrical, staged. The Remington sat precisely centered on the desk, a stack of typed pages beside it, all showing the same word repeated: leave, 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 leave. "When did this start?" 10 days ago. Only at night, always between 11:40 and midnight. Blackwood's hands trembled slightly as he gestured at the pages. "I've sat here watching." The keys depressed themselves, always spelling the same word. Now, our man had heard plenty of stories about haunted typewriters. Writers were superstitious creatures, prone to attributing supernatural causes to mechanical failures. But Blackwood seemed genuinely frightened, and fear has a smell, sour and sharp, like copper pennies left in vinegar. He examined the Remington with the thoroughness of a surgeon. Model 12, manufactured in 1922, well-maintained, recently oiled. The type bars moved smoothly, the ribbon advanced properly, the escapement clicked with satisfying precision. Nothing wrong that he could see. "I'll need to observe it tonight." "Of course. Edmund will prepare a room." Blackwood paused, then added quietly, "My father died in this house. Heart attack at his desk, they said, though he was healthy as a horse the day before. Sometimes I wonder." He didn't finish, but our man understood. The dead had their ways of lingering, especially in houses built on other people's suffering. Though in his experience, the living were usually more troublesome than any ghost. Edmund showed him to a guest room in the east wing, apologizing for its distance from the main house. "Staff quarters are limited these days, sir. Just myself and Mrs. Brennan, who cooks 3 days a week." The room was larger than our man's entire apartment, with a 4-poster bed that could have slept a small army, and windows overlooking the gorge where the railroad tracks ran. Far below, he could see the dark mouth of the tunnel that carried trains through the mountain. Dinner was served at 7 in a dining room designed for 30 but set for 2. Blackwood picked at roasted chicken while discussing his work, or rather his lack of it. 3 years without a single story. It's as if my father's death took my imagination with it." He smiled bitterly. "Perhaps that's why the typewriter acts up. Even it's tired of waiting." Our man ate methodically, listening to Blackwood's monologue while observing Edmund, who served with clockwork precision, but whose eyes kept drifting to the windows. The butler had the look of a man counting days on a calendar only he could see. After dinner, Blackwood retired early, claiming headaches that had plagued him since his father's death. Our man found himself alone in the vast writing room with Edmund, who was adjusting the fire, with movements so precise they seemed choreographed. "Mr. Blackwood seems unwell," our man ventured. "The isolation weighs on him, sir." Edmund's British accent had softened after 2 decades in Vermont, but stress sharpened it again. His father was a difficult man, but he filled these rooms. Now there's too much space and too little life. Margaret Brennan appeared with coffee, a woman of 34 with the kind of tired that sleep couldn't cure. Irish accent thick as cream, hands red from endless washing. She set the tray down carefully, but our man noticed her fingers trembling. "Will you be staying long, sir?" "Until I solve Mr. Blackwood's problem." She exchanged a quick glance with Edmund, the kind of look that carries entire conversations. "Best you do it quickly, then. This house doesn't like strangers staying over long." After she left, Edmund's composure cracked slightly. "Forgive, Mrs. Brennan. The recent disturbances have everyone on edge." "How long have you been with the family?" 23 years this November. Came over from Hampshire when Mr. Augustus was expanding his mills." Edmund's eyes went distant. "Different times then. The house full of guests, parties that lasted until dawn. Mrs. Blackwood was still alive, Cornelius's mother. She had a way of making even this mausoleum feel warm." Our man understood the weight of watching life drain from a place you'd given your best years to. He'd seen it in the Veterans Hospital, men clinging to memories of vitality while their bodies betrayed them incrementally. Edmund excused himself to attend to evening duties, leaving our man alone with the Remington. He examined it again, this time removing the outer casing entirely. The mechanism was pristine, almost suspiciously so. Most typewriters this age showed wear patterns, tiny scratches and marks that told their history. This one looked barely used, despite Blackwood's claims of writing 7 novels on it. At 11:30, he positioned himself in a chair with a clear view of the desk. The house had gone quiet, except for the grandfather clock in the hall, counting seconds like a metal heart. Somewhere far off, a train whistle echoed through the gorge. 11:40 came and went. Then 11:45. Our man was beginning to wonder if the demonstration would fail when he heard it. A soft click, then another. The keys were moving. L-E-A-V-E. The word appeared on the page as he watched, each letter striking with mechanical precision. No visible hand, no obvious mechanism, just the keys depressing and rising, the carriage advancing, the word appearing. It happened 3 more times before stopping at 11:51. He approached the desk slowly, half expecting the phenomenon to resume. The typed page showed 4 iterations of leave, perfectly aligned, identical spacing. He touched the keys. They were cold, colder than the ambient temperature could account for, but something else had caught his attention. During the event, he'd felt a subtle vibration through the floorboards, barely perceptible, but definitely there. His damaged hand, with its enhanced sensitivity, had picked it up immediately. A rhythmic tremor that seemed to come from below, from the direction of the gorge. Unable to sleep, he wandered the house, finding his way to the kitchen where Margaret Brennan sat at a scarred wooden table writing a letter by candlelight. "Couldn't sleep either?" She didn't seem surprised to see him. "The typewriter performed as advertised." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Performed? Like it's putting on a show." She folded her letter quickly. "My boy has polio. Lives at the sanitarium in town." "These wages are the only thing keeping him there. I'm sorry." "Don't be. We all have our ghosts." She stood, tucking the letter into her apron. Edmund lost his wife 5 years back. Consumption. His daughter moved to Boston, barely writes. This place is all he has left, and it's dying too. Our man thought about loneliness, how it could drive people to desperate acts. You think Edmund would do anything to save it? Margaret's eyes sharpened. Edmund would walk through fire for the Blackwood family. But there's different kinds of loyalty, aren't there? The kind that serves and the kind that strangles. She left him there in the kitchen, surrounded by copper pots that reflected his distorted face back at him. He made his way back to his room, pausing at a window overlooking the gorge. Far below, a freight train emerged from the tunnel, its headlight cutting through the darkness like a blade through black cloth. He checked his watch, 11:47. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. But even if the train's vibrations somehow triggered the typewriter, that didn't explain the specificity of the message, or why it had only started 10 days ago when trains had been running through that tunnel for 40 years. Back in his room, he lay on the absurd four-poster bed, staring at the ceiling where water stains formed patterns like tea leaves waiting to be read. The house creaked around him, settling into itself with sounds that might have been footsteps, or might have been wood remembering the trees it used to be. Tomorrow he would need to examine the typewriter more carefully, perhaps dismantle it entirely. But tonight, listening to the house breathe around him, he wondered if the machine was really the problem, or merely the symptom of something larger. A household drowning in its own isolation. Servants trapped by duty and circumstance. A writer paralyzed by the weight of inheritance. The train whistles sounded again, distant now, heading north toward Canada and freedom. Morning arrived wrapped in mist that turned the gorge into a bowl of gray soup. Our man woke to find Edmund already in the dining room, setting out breakfast with movements that seemed almost penitential. Silver clinked against china like tiny bells calling faithful to a service nobody attended anymore. "Mr. Blackwood takes breakfast in his room," Edmund explained, though our man hadn't asked. "He finds mornings difficult. His father always insisted on breakfast at 7 sharp, you see. Old habits die harder than old men." The eggs were perfect, the toast precisely browned, the coffee strong enough to wake the dead, though in this house the dead seemed to be doing fine on their own. Our man ate while studying Edmund's face, noticing the deep lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his left hand that vanished when he thought someone was watching. 23 years is a long time to serve one family. "Indeed, sir." Edmund refilled the coffee cup without being asked. Though it's been 3 families, really. Mr. Augustus and his wife, young Mr. Cornelius before his marriage failed, and now this. The word carried weight, like a stone dropped into still water. After breakfast, our man returned to the writing room with his tools, specialized implements most typewriter repairmen wouldn't recognize. A dental mirror for seeing into impossible angles, calipers that could measure variations of 1/1000th of an inch. A stethoscope he'd modified to detect mechanical irregularities. He dismantled the Remington piece by piece, laying each component on white cloth like a surgeon organizing organs. The machine's interior was immaculate, but as he examined the type bars under magnification, he found something peculiar. Microscopic scratches on the arms of 4 letters, L, E, A, V. Fresh scratches, made within the last 2 weeks. Blackwood appeared at noon, looking like he'd slept in his clothes or perhaps hadn't slept at all. His hands shook as he poured himself brandy from a crystal decanter that caught the light like frozen honey. "Any progress? Tell me about your father's death." The writer's hand paused mid-pour. "Heart attack, 3 years ago next month. Edmund found him at that very desk, slumped over his ledgers. He completed the pour, took a long swallow. The doctor said it was instantaneous, but his face, he looked terrified. What was he working on? The mill accounts. Always the mill accounts, even after the mills were gone. He couldn't accept that his empire had crumbled. Blackwood moved to the window overlooking the gorge. He built that railroad spur down there, you know. Cost him a fortune, but he needed it to ship textiles. Now it just carries freight and the occasional passenger train, mocking his ambition every time it passes. Our man reassembled the typewriter slowly, thinking about vibrations and timing, about messages and motivations. Your writer's block, when exactly did it start? The day after his funeral. I sat down to write, and nothing came, as if he'd taken the words with him. Blackwood laughed bitterly. Perhaps that's his real ghost, not typing messages, but stealing them. Edmund appeared with lunch, cold chicken and bread that might have been fresh yesterday. As he set down the tray, our man noticed him glance at the typewriter, then quickly away, like someone avoiding eye contact with an accusation. "Edmund, you found Mr. Augustus?" The butler's composure wavered slightly. "Yes, sir. Terrible morning. I'd brought his coffee at 7, as always. He was bent over the desk, pen still in hand. What was he writing?" "Numbers, sir." Always numbers at the end. After lunch, Blackwood excused himself for his afternoon rest, a euphemism for drinking alone in his study. Edmund began the elaborate process of maintaining a house too large for its inhabitants, leaving our man alone with his investigation. He examined the desk next, running his fingers along its underside, feeling for anything unusual. Near the back left leg, his fingers found something, a small hole, recently drilled, with traces of wood shavings still clinging to its edges. He used the dental mirror to look inside and saw a tiny wire, no thicker than a hair, running down through the floor. Margaret Brennan entered with tea he hadn't requested, setting it down with elaborate care. "You're thorough, I'll give you that." "It's my nature." Edmund's thorough, too. Checks every lock twice before bed. Counts the silver weekly, even though no one visits anymore. She paused, adjusting the tea things unnecessarily. "He's been writing more letters lately." "To Boston, mostly. His daughter lives there, married to a banker who thinks domestic service is beneath them. Natural for a father to write his daughter. 3 times a week?" She shook her head. "And he always posts them himself, never leaves them for the mail carrier." Our man filed this information alongside the scratches, the wire, the train schedule. Patterns were emerging. But like a typewriter ribbon that had been reused too many times, the message was still faint, overlapping, hard to read clearly. That afternoon, he traced the wire through the floor, following it down to the basement, a vast space that smelled of stone and stagnation. The wire led to a small device hidden behind the furnace, a thing of springs and mercury that looked homemade but expertly crafted. When he tilted it slightly, mercury flowed to one end, completing a circuit, a gravity switch activated by vibration. Elegant in its simplicity, diabolic in its application. But knowing how the typewriter was triggered didn't explain who had installed it or why they'd chosen that particular message. The Ford protested all the way down from Crow's Ridge, coughing like a consumptive at every turn. Our man had told Blackwood he needed special tools from his workshop. Not entirely a lie, though the tools he really needed were distance and perspective. The mansion's atmosphere clung like cobwebs. He needed clear air to think. Brattleboro seemed almost jubilant After 3 days at the manor, people walked the streets with purpose, shops displayed their wares with modest pride, and the ordinary noise of commerce sounded like symphony after the oppressive silence of too many empty rooms. He parked outside his workshop to find Ruth Carlyle waiting, the repaired Underwood ready for collection. She wore her Sunday dress on a Thursday, navy blue with small white flowers that made her look younger, almost hopeful. "Dr. Whitmore said you were back." "How is the mysterious mansion?" "Instructive." He unlocked the shop, noting that she'd been sitting on the step for some time. The dust pattern gave her away. "The Underwood's ready. New spring in the space bar. Should last another decade if the Hemlock boy doesn't compose with his fists." She followed him inside, pretending to inspect the repaired typewriter while actually studying his face. "You look tired. When did you last eat properly?" "Edmund Harwick serves excellent meals." Edmund Harwick. She said the name like testing its weight. "British fellow, isn't he? His wife used to come to town for supplies. Lovely woman, always buying books on roses, though nothing grows on that ridge except resentment." This was new information. Our man's hands paused over the Underwood. "You knew her?" "Mary Harwick. Checked out gardening books every month, planning for when they'd leave service and have their own place. She had consumption already then, though she hid it well." Said Edmund had saved enough for a little cottage near Boston, close to their daughter. The pieces shifted in our man's mind like type bars aligning to strike. A cottage near Boston. Savings accumulated over 23 years. Plans interrupted by death. A daughter who rarely wrote. A man trapped in service to a dying household. "Ruth, do you have the train schedules?" "Of course." She produced a timetable from her purse. Librarians always had information ready. "The night freight runs through the Gorge Tunnel at 11:47. Has for 15 years, regular as clockwork." 11:47. The exact time the typewriter activated. Our man studied the schedule, noting that service had been reduced recently. Economic pressure forcing the railroad to cut routes. How long before they eliminated the night freight entirely? How long before the vibrations stopped? Dr. Whitmore entered the shop, leaning heavily on his cane, gout making him cranky as a wet cat. "Saw the Ford outside." "That Blackwood business sorted?" "Still sorting." The doctor lowered himself into the chair reserved for customers, though he never brought typewriters for repair, preferring his handwritten prescriptions that nobody could read. "Cornelius came to me last month. Wanted sleeping drafts. Said the house was keeping him awake. I told him laudanum would help, but he refused. Said his father died with a bottle of it hidden in his desk. Augustus Blackwood used laudanum? For years. Heart troubles, he claimed, though I never found anything wrong with him. Strong as an ox until the day he died." Whitmore shifted, grimacing. "Strange thing about his death. Edmund called me immediately, but Cornelius waited 3 hours before coming down from his room. Said he couldn't face it." Ruth busied herself examining other repaired typewriters, but our man could tell she was listening. The shop had become a confessional of sorts, people sharing information they'd held close, as if his investigation had given them permission to voice old suspicions. "What really killed Augustus?" Whitmore shrugged. "Heart stopped. Whether from natural causes or fright or something else, I couldn't say. But I'll tell you this. That house has been dying since the day he built it. Built on suffering, maintained by servitude. And now, collapsing under its own weight. After Whitmore left, Ruth lingered, unnecessarily adjusting the typewriters on display. "There's something else, about the Harwicks." Our man waited. He'd learned that silence drew out truth better than questions. Mary Harwick wrote letters to the library, asking about positions in Boston. Librarian assistant jobs, anything respectable. She was trying to find work for when they left. Ruth's voice dropped. The last letter came 2 weeks before she died. She said Edmund had finally convinced her they needed to stay just 1 more year. 1 more year became forever. She took the Underwood and left, but not before placing her hand briefly on his damaged one, a touch so light he might have imagined it, except for the warmth that lingered after. Alone in his workshop, our man considered what he'd learned. Edmund, trapped by duty and circumstance, his wife's death chaining him to a house he'd planned to leave. Savings that meant nothing without someone to share them with. A daughter in Boston who'd married up and cut ties with her servant father. He gathered his tools, not just the regular ones, but certain items acquired during the war, when he'd learned that sometimes the most delicate mechanisms required the most forceful interventions. A tiny drill that could bore through metal without leaving visible marks. A set of picks that could manipulate any lock or mechanism. And most importantly, a small vial of mercury he'd kept from his days repairing telegraph equipment. The device in Blackwood's basement was clever, but cleverness could be turned against itself. If someone had built a mechanism to create a haunting, perhaps that same mechanism could be used to reveal the haunter. The return to Blackwood Manor felt like descending into a mine shaft, the light diminishing with each curve of the road, the air growing heavier, older, full of unspoken grievances. Our man carried his specialized tools in a leather case that had survived the war, its surface scarred, but its contents intact, precise instruments for revealing hidden truths. Edmund greeted him at the door with barely concealed agitation. "Mr. Blackwood has been asking for you. The typewriter acted up again last night, but differently. The message changed." In the writing room, Blackwood stood over the Remington like a mourner at a grave. The new pages showed a different word. Soon, 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 soon. "It knows you're investigating," Blackwood said, his voice hollow. "It's escalating." Our man examined the new typing. Same mechanical precision, same timing with the night freight, but the letter patterns were different. S-O-N. He thought of the scratches he'd found on L-E-A-V. Someone had been changing the mechanism, updating the message. "I need to examine the basement again, alone." Blackwood waved dismissively, already reaching for his brandy. Edmund started to protest, then thought better of it, retreating to his duties with the rigid posture of a man holding himself together through will alone. In the basement, our man located the mercury switch device again. This time he examined it with the modified stethoscope, listening to its mechanical heartbeat. The construction was remarkable. Handmade but expertly crafted, using watch parts and telegraph components. The kind of device only someone with intimate knowledge of both precision mechanics and electrical systems could build. He found something else. Tiny scratches on the floor. A trail of them, leading from the device to a workbench, hidden behind the coal bin. On it lay tools, delicate implements for working with small mechanisms, and a notebook filled with diagrams. The handwriting was careful, educated, British-influenced in its letter formation. The notebook contained more than mechanical drawings. There were train schedules with certain times circled, drafts of letters never sent, and on one page, a list of Boston addresses with rental prices. The most recent entry was dated 2 weeks ago. C grows worse, drinks himself to sleep. The house will kill him as it killed his father. I cannot watch another Blackwood die in this tomb. Our man pocketed the notebook and returned upstairs to find Margaret in the kitchen, peeling potatoes with mechanical precision. She looked up, unsurprised by his presence. "You found it then? The device?" Not a question. He sat across from her, noting how her hands never stopped moving, the knife sliding through potato flesh in perfect spirals. "How long have you known?" "Since the second night. I clean everywhere, including the basement. Hard not to notice when something appears that wasn't there before." She set aside a peeled potato, picked up another. "But Edmund pays my wages, and my boy needs his treatments." "You could have told Blackwood." "Could I?" She laughed, short and bitter. "Tell the man who signs the checks that his butler, the only person keeping this place from collapsing entirely, is playing ghost? Edmund would be dismissed. I'd lose my position for disloyalty, and we'd all be worse off." "So you said nothing?" "I said nothing." Another potato, another spiral of skin. Just like I said nothing when I saw Edmund testing his device, timing it with the trains. Just like I said nothing when he spent weeks learning how to manipulate the typewriter's mechanism from below. Our man considered the moral mathematics of poverty, how need could make accomplices of us all. Why leave? Why soon? Margaret set down her knife, wiped her hands on her apron. "His daughter wrote last month, first letter in 2 years. She's getting divorced, needs her father. Wants him to come to Boston, live with her, help with her children. But Edmund won't abandon Mr. Blackwood, not after serving the family for over 2 decades. Unless Blackwood abandons the house first." "Exactly. If the house is haunted, if staying here becomes unbearable, Mr. Blackwood might finally leave, sell the place, pension off the servants properly, go somewhere warm, and write again. Edmund sees it as saving everyone, including himself." The logic was elegant in its desperation, a loyal servant trying to engineer freedom for master and man alike. But our man had seen how elaborate deceptions, even those born of good intentions, had a way of corrupting everyone they touched. That evening, he positioned himself in the basement before the night freight was due. At 11:45, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Careful, practiced, trying not to make the third step creak. Edmund appeared, carrying a small lantern, moving with the confidence of someone who'd made this journey many times. The butler froze when he saw our man sitting beside his device. For a moment, neither spoke. The house held its breath around them, waiting. "How long have you known?" Edmund asked finally, setting down the lantern with steady hands. "Since this afternoon. The craftsmanship gave you away. Only someone who'd maintained this house's mechanisms for decades could build something so precise." Edmund sat on a crate, suddenly looking every one of his 61 years. "I suppose you'll tell Mr. Blackwood immediately." "That depends on why you're doing this." The train whistle sounded in the distance, approaching the tunnel. Edmund glanced at his pocket watch, an old silver piece that caught the lamplight like a captured star. 40 years of service between my father and myself. 40 years of yes, sir, no, sir, very good, sir. My wife died believing we'd have our cottage garden. My daughter married a man who's ashamed of my profession. The wine cellar stretched beneath the house like a catacomb, bottles sleeping in racks that hadn't been disturbed since Augustus Blackwood's death. Edmund led the way with practiced steps, avoiding the loose stones and low beams that would catch a stranger's head. Our man followed, understanding that some confessions required darkness, the weight of earth above to press out truth. They sat on crates between dusty vintages, 1893 Bordeaux, watching them with glass eyes. Edmund produced a flask from his jacket, good Irish whiskey, probably pilfered from Blackwood's supply, and offered it. Our man took a pull, feeling the burn chase away the cellar's chill. "My father was in service," Edmund began, voice low as if the bottles might overhear. "Taught me that loyalty was the highest virtue, that a good servant was invisible but essential. I believed him. Came to America full of those ideals, thinking I'd serve with dignity and save enough to buy my freedom." The train had passed, leaving only the house's settling sounds. Wood contracting, pipes ticking, the building digesting another day of decay. Mary understood at first. We saved every penny, planned every detail. A cottage in Brookline she wanted, close enough to Boston for culture, but with room for roses. His voice caught. She drew pictures of it, measured hypothetical rooms, chose wallpaper from catalogs we couldn't afford. What changed? Augustus Blackwood changed. Or perhaps revealed what he'd always been. As the mills failed, he grew crueler, demanded perfection, raged at imagined slights. Mary bore the brunt of it. He'd complain about dust that didn't exist, food that was perfectly prepared. She developed consumption, but we couldn't afford to leave, not without references, not without the pension he'd promised. Edmund took back the flask, a longer pull this time. After she died, I found her journal. Pages and pages about how this house was killing us slowly, how we'd become prisoners of our own respectability. The last entry said she was glad to be dying, glad to escape. Our man thought about the typewriter upstairs, the mechanical ghost Edmund had created. "So you decided to haunt Blackwood into leaving?" Augustus first, actually. Edmund's confession hung in the air like smoke. "I started the device 3 months before his death. Different message then. Guilty, it typed, over and over. He was taking laudanum by the bottle, seeing messages everywhere. The night he died, he was at his desk, trying to catch the typewriter in the act. You killed him? Fear killed him. I just provided the soundtrack." Edmund's smile was terrible in the lamplight. His heart gave out, watching the keys move, convinced his victims had come for him at last. All those mill workers he'd destroyed, finally getting their say. The moral weight of this settled between them. Murder by mechanism, death by suggestion. Our man had seen enough of killing to recognize its many faces, but this was something new. Murder by theater, assassination through anxiety. And now Cornelius? Cornelius is different. He's innocent of his father's sins, just trapped by them. I want him free. Want us all free. The house needs to die, not the man. Edmund stood, suddenly urgent. My daughter wrote that her husband abandoned her for his secretary. She needs me, and I need to go to her, but I cannot, will not, abandon Mr. Cornelius while he rots in this tomb. So you're trying to scare him into selling, into living. Have you watched him? He doesn't write, barely eats, drinks himself toward his father's grave. If a ghost can drive him from this house, perhaps he'll find himself again. They climbed back to the kitchen where Margaret sat darning socks by candlelight, steadfastly not asking where they'd been. Edmund poured tea from a pot that never seemed to empty, his hands steady despite his confessions. "What will you do?" he asked our man. The question had weight. Expose Edmund and destroy a desperate man trying to save everyone, including himself? Maintain the deception and be complicit in an elaborate fraud? Or find some third path, the kind that appeared when you looked at a mechanism from an unexpected angle? "The device needs adjusting," our man said finally. "The timing is off. Makes it too obvious it's connected to the trains. And the message should change, become more specific. If you're going to save Blackwood through haunting, at least do it properly." Edmund's face showed surprise, then something like hope. "You'll help?" "I'll improve. Whether that's helping depends on your perspective." Margaret looked up from her darning. Men and their mechanisms, always thinking you can fix the world with springs and gears. But she was smiling slightly, and our man realized she'd been part of this from the beginning, not actively participating, but enabling through selective blindness. Another servant trapped in the web of loyalty and need. "Tomorrow night," our man said, "the message changes to something that will actually motivate Blackwood. Not fear, but purpose. Your device created a ghost. Now we need to give that ghost a voice worth hearing." Edmund nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. The recognition of men who'd learned that sometimes the greatest kindness wore the mask of cruelty, that salvation could come dressed as damnation. What kind of message? Our man thought of Blackwood upstairs, drowning in brandy and grief, a writer without words in a house built on suffering. The kind that reminds him why he writes in the first place. The dead don't want us to join them, Edmund. They want us to live the lives they couldn't. The next morning arrived shrouded in rain that turned the windows into waterfalls, the house becoming an island in a sea of gray. Our man found Blackwood in the writing room earlier than usual, sober for once, staring at the Remington with the intensity of someone trying to read their future in tea leaves. "I've been thinking," Blackwood said without preamble, "about my father's death, about this haunting. About the fact that you've been in my basement with Edmund until 3 in the morning." Our man kept his expression neutral, though inside he recalculated. Blackwood was more observant than his drinking suggested. "You weren't asleep." "I haven't truly slept in 3 years. Laudanum helps, but then I dream of my father standing at that desk, counting money that turned to blood in his hands." Blackwood moved to the window, watching the rain assault the glass. "I know Edmund built the device." This confession shifted everything. Like discovering a typewriter's problem wasn't mechanical, but intentional, a feature disguised as a flaw. Our man set down his tools, giving Blackwood his full attention. "How long have you known?" "Since the 3rd night. I found his notebook weeks ago while he was in town. At first I was furious, the betrayal, the deception. Then I realized something extraordinary." Blackwood turned, and his eyes held a clarity our man hadn't seen before. "Edmund cared enough to haunt me. After everything this house has taken from him, he still cares enough to try saving me from it." "You let him continue." "I let him continue. and something unexpected happened. The haunting gave me what 3 years of grief couldn't, a reason to wake up. Watching those keys move, seeing those words appear, I felt something stir. Not fear, but fascination. My father would have raged, called the police, had Edmund arrested. But I saw it for what it was, a story. The first real story I'd encountered since his death. Our man understood then. Blackwood hadn't been paralyzed by grief, but by guilt. The survivor's paralysis of living in the shadow of someone larger than life, even when that someone was monstrous. The haunting had given him permission to feel something other than obligation to his father's memory. Edmund believes he's saving you. He is, just not how he thinks. Blackwood pulled out a manuscript from his desk drawer, pages covered in fresh typing. I've been writing at night, after the haunting, a new novel about a house that consumes its inhabitants, servants and masters alike. Every time the typewriter performs its trick, I write what comes next. Edmund's ghost has become my muse. The irony was exquisite. A butler trying to frighten his master into leaving, instead inspiring him to create. Our man thought of all the mechanisms he'd repaired, how sometimes the malfunction was more valuable than the intended function. What about Edmund's daughter? His need to leave? I've been thinking about that too. Blackwood returned to his desk, running his fingers over the Remington's keys. This house needs to die. My father built it on suffering, maintained it through cruelty. Every room holds someone's pain. But it doesn't need to die empty. He produced a letter from his jacket, the envelope bearing a Boston address. I've written to Edmund's daughter, explaining that I'm converting the house into a writer's retreat. I'll need a director, someone with experience in managing difficult personalities and maintaining large properties. The position comes with a cottage on the grounds and a salary that would make her banker husband reconsider his prejudices. Edmund doesn't know. Not yet. I wanted the haunting to run its course first. Tonight, when the typewriter performs, I'll confront him. Act terrified, demand he explain himself. Give him the dramatic climax he's been building toward. Then, when he confesses, I'll make my offer. Our man considered the layers of deception. Edmund deceiving Blackwood, Blackwood deceiving Edmund, everyone performing roles in a play they'd written without consultation. And if he refuses? Pride runs deep in servants who've given their lives to one family. Then I'll sell the house anyway and pension him off so generously he'll have no choice but to accept. Sometimes freedom has to be forced on those who've forgotten how to want it. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows like fingers on typewriter keys. Somewhere in the house, Edmund went about his duties, unaware that his elaborate deception had been discovered, transformed, made into art. "Your novel," our man asked. "How does it end?" Blackwood smiled, the first genuine smile our man had seen from him. "With fire, cleansing fire that takes the house but frees the people. The servants escape with their dignity intact, the master with his words restored. Everyone gets what they need, even if it's not what they thought they wanted." That evening our man made his final adjustments to Edmund's device. He added a secondary mechanism, one that would allow for longer messages, more complex communications. If this was to be the ghost's final performance, it should be memorable. At dinner, Edmund served with unusual ceremony, as if sensing something momentous approaching. Margaret had prepared roast lamb, the kind of meal served for celebrations or farewells. Everyone played their parts perfectly. The haunted master, the loyal butler, the nervous cook, the investigating repairman. But underneath, currents of truth ran like hidden wires, waiting for the right vibration to activate them. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 11:30, its chimes rolling through the house like a summoning. Everyone had gathered in the writing room, Blackwood behind his desk, Edmund standing at attention by the door, Margaret hovering near the coffee service, and our man positioned where he could observe all their faces. The Remington sat centered on the desk, waiting like an actor for its cue. "Perhaps tonight it won't happen," Blackwood said, his voice carrying perfectly rehearsed nervousness. "Perhaps whatever spirit haunts this machine has said its piece." Edmund's fingers twitched slightly, the only sign of his anxiety. He knew the device would activate. He'd checked it just an hour ago when he thought everyone was occupied elsewhere. Our man had watched him from the shadows, noting how he'd adjusted the mercury switch with the precision of a watchmaker. 11:40 came with painful slowness, then 11:45. The train whistle sounded in the distance, mournful and inevitable. Edmund's breathing quickened almost imperceptibly. Margaret set down a coffee cup too carefully, the tiny clink loud as a gunshot. Then it began. But instead of the usual "leave" or "soon," the typewriter produced something different. "Edmund has served enough." The butler's face went white. This wasn't his message, wasn't what he'd programmed. His eyes found our man's, understanding flooding his features. The typewriter continued. "Time to live your own life." My God, Blackwood stood, his performance magnificent. "It knows your name, Edmund. The spirit knows you." Edmund stepped forward, his composure cracking like ice in spring. "Sir, I can explain." "Daughter needs her father." The butler's legs seemed to give out. He sank into a chair, his 61 years suddenly visible in every line of his face. How does it know about Catherine?" Our man remained silent, watching the drama unfold. He'd programmed these messages after his conversation with Blackwood, knowing Edmund needed to believe his deception had worked, even as it was being exposed. "Tell the truth," the typewriter commanded. Edmund broke then, words pouring out like water through a broken dam. The device, the plan, his desperation, his daughter's letter, everything. He confessed to creating the haunting, to trying to save Blackwood from the house's grip, to his own inability to abandon his post despite the cost. "I've betrayed your trust," he finished, head bowed. "After 23 years of service, I've proven myself false. I'll pack my things tonight." "You'll do no such thing," Blackwood said, his voice gentle now, the performance over. "Edmund, look at me." When the butler raised his head, Blackwood was holding out the letter he'd shown our man earlier. "This came from Boston yesterday. Not from your daughter, but from me to her." And her response. Edmund took the letter with trembling hands, reading slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something that might have been hope. "A writer's retreat?" His voice was barely a whisper. "This house needs purpose, Edmund, not ghosts. And I need my words back, which, thanks to your elaborate deception, I've found." Blackwood gestured to his manuscript. "You tried to haunt me into leaving. Instead, you've inspired me to transform this place into something useful." Margaret stepped forward then, her own secret knowledge evident. "And my position? Head cook for the retreat." Writers are always hungry, especially the young ones who'll come here on scholarship. Blackwood's smile included everyone in the room. This house was built on exploitation. Let it be reborn through generosity. Edmund stood slowly, dignity reassembling itself like a typewriter being put back together. "Your father would be appalled." "Yes," Blackwood agreed. "He would be absolutely appalled. I consider that the highest recommendation." Our man began dismantling the device then, removing it piece by piece while the others talked through the details of transformation. The mercury switch, the wires, the clever mechanisms that had turned vibration into communication, all of it came apart under his practiced hands. "What will you do with it?" Edmund asked, watching his creation being undone. "Keep it," our man said. A reminder that sometimes the most elaborate mechanisms are just people trying to tell each other the truth. The night train passed again at 12:47, but this time the typewriter remained silent, just a machine waiting for human hands to give it purpose. Edmund and Blackwood sat together at the desk, no longer master and servant, but co-conspirators in resurrection, planning the retreat's details with the enthusiasm of men who'd found purpose after long darkness. Margaret made fresh coffee, humming an Irish tune that sounded like hope. She'd already begun mental menus for hungry writers, calculating how many could be fed on the budget Blackwood was proposing. Our man packed his tools methodically. The job was done, the mystery solved, though not in any way he could have anticipated. He'd come to fix a haunted typewriter, and ended up repairing something larger, the broken mechanism of human connection that had seized up under the weight of obligation and grief. "Your fee," Blackwood said, approaching with a check that was far too generous. "The agreed amount is sufficient." "The agreed amount was for fixing a typewriter. You've fixed much more." Blackwood pressed the check into his damaged hand. "Besides, the retreat will need someone to maintain its typewriters. Writers are notoriously hard on their machines." 3 weeks had passed since the haunting of Blackwood Manor ended, and November had settled over Vermont like a wool blanket, heavy and gray, but not unpleasant. Our man sat in his workshop, cleaning a Corona portable that belonged to a traveling salesman when the first snow began to fall. Fat, lazy flakes that took their time reaching the ground, as if unsure they really wanted to commit to winter. The letter from New York had arrived that morning, Blackwood's handwriting now confident where it had once been shaky. "The city overwhelms and inspires in equal measure." I've taken rooms at the Algonquin, where the writers gather to complain about everything while secretly loving their craft. The new novel progresses. Funny how I needed a fake ghost to exorcise the real ones. Edmund's daughter arrived at the house yesterday with her children. You should see him with his grandchildren. 23 years of practiced invisibility, undone by a 4-year-old demanding piggyback rides. Our man smiled, imagining Edmund surrendering his butler's dignity to childhood's democracy. The workshop door chimed, and Ruth Carlyle entered, carrying not a typewriter, but a coffee pot and 2 cups, the steam writing temporary messages in the cold air. "Thought you might need warming up," she said, though the shop was plenty warm. She'd been coming by more often these past weeks, always with some excuse. A typewriter that needed checking, library business that could have waited, now coffee that he hadn't requested but found he wanted. "Blackwood donated his father's entire library to us," she said, pouring coffee with librarian precision, "including some rare first editions. The board is beside themselves. Guilt makes generous donors, or freedom does." She handed him a cup, their fingers brushing in a way that wasn't quite accidental. "Edmund's daughter wrote to the library asking about cataloging systems. They're converting the mansion's east wing into a proper research library for the retreat." Through the window, they watched Brattleboro go about its Saturday business. The Henshaw boy ran past with telegrams. Mrs. Morrison swept her store's entrance with violent determination, and from the newspaper office came the familiar percussion of multiple typewriters, the sound like rain on a tin roof. Dr. Whitmore appeared at exactly 4 o'clock, as he had every Thursday and Saturday since the war ended. Chess Day. He entered stamping snow from his boots. His gout apparently improved enough for social visits, but not enough to prevent complaining about it. "Heard from Maggie Brennan," he announced, settling into his usual chair while Ruth set up the chessboard, a ritual that had developed without anyone discussing it. "Her boy's responding well to the new treatment. Amazing what proper funding can accomplish." Our man moved his pawn, beginning their familiar dance. "Blackwood's providing the funding?" "Anonymously, but yes. Seems the haunting taught him about invisible suffering." Whitmore moved his knight in his trademark aggressive opening. "Speaking of invisible things becoming visible," he gestured meaningfully at Ruth, who was now watering the single plant our man kept on the windowsill, a scraggly thing that survived on neglect and sporadic attention. She'd been coming by for 3 years, but something had shifted since the Blackwood affair. Perhaps solving one mystery had opened his eyes to others. "Your move," Whitmore said, though he wasn't talking about chess. That evening, after Whitmore had won 2 games out of 3, letting our man win the middle game with such obviousness it was almost insulting, Ruth remained. They stood at the window watching the snow accumulate, transforming Brattleboro into something cleaner than it was. "I've been ordering those romance novels for years," she said suddenly, "under false names because the literary society would be scandalized. But do you know what I've realized? They're all the same story. Someone waiting for someone else to notice them." Our man thought about Edmund's elaborate mechanism, designed to make Blackwood see what was already there. About Blackwood's father counting money while his house crumbled around him. About himself fixing machines while life happened in the spaces between repairs. "Sometimes we need ghosts to tell us simple truths," he said. "Or sometimes we just need to stop waiting for them." She turned to face him fully. "I know you eat dinner alone every night. I know because I do too. Seems inefficient, don't you think? From a mechanical standpoint?" He looked at her. Really looked. Perhaps for the first time. Saw the silver threading through her brown hair, the laugh lines that suggested joy despite loneliness, the ink stains on her fingers that marked her as someone who lived among words. "Highly inefficient," he agreed. Later, after they'd shared a simple dinner at the small restaurant that pretended prohibition wasn't happening in its back room, after she'd kissed him goodbye with a promise of tomorrow, our man sat in his workshop as the town settled into sleep. He pulled out Edmund's mercury switch device, which he'd kept as promised. Such a simple thing. Glass, mercury, wire, and intention. But it had changed everything, revealing that the real haunting wasn't supernatural, but human. The weight of obligation, the paralysis of grief, the 1,000 ways we trap ourselves in lives we never chose. From next door came the sound of a single typewriter. Someone at the newspaper working late. Probably young Tommy Harrison writing his sports column about the high school football team that hadn't won a game all season, but kept playing anyway. The sound was rhythmic, honest, human. No ghosts needed. Our man thought about Blackwood in New York writing again. Edmund with his grandchildren finally living his own story. Margaret planning meals for hungry writers who didn't exist yet but would. Ruth, who'd been patient as only a librarian could be, waiting for him to notice what had always been there. He began to reassemble the device, not to use, but to remember. Every mechanism told a story, but the most complex machines were always the human ones, built from hope and fear, need and desire, all the invisible springs and gears that moved people through their days. Outside, the snow continued falling, covering the town's imperfections with temporary grace. Somewhere a train whistle sounded, carrying its cargo through the darkness toward morning. And in his workshop, surrounded by machines that transformed thought into language, our man understood that the real mystery had never been the haunted typewriter, but the reasons we haunt ourselves and the courage it takes to stop.